Alright, I am beginning yet again, and I'm going to build those rings up in the same way, but we're going to use another technique this time that we have not used yet. So still alternating soap and ink. I still have some of that swirly excess from my last prints floating in my water, and I'll switch it up a little bit this time. Just going to reload my brushes and make a second ring. And watch how it instantly pushes my first rings out of the way as this fresh batch of ink and soap expand because they're so saturated. Expand nicely over the surface of the water. Alright, and the technique that I'm using this time is I'm going to take an instrument like this skewer, and I'm going to run it through the ink on the surface of the water. And even finer than the skewer is just this very thin piece of paper that I sliced, and I'll run that through as well. Just different ways of disturbing that water and creating these ripple effects that give us that swirling marbled look. Alright, and again, I'm watching my pattern swirl around, waiting for an opportune time to drop in, this time the watercolor paper, which is a bit thicker and stiffer than the other papers. So I'm worried it may not lay as nicely into the water. So I'm really trying to just ever so gently drop it down. And I'll really let this one soak in because it's a little harder on the surface than the other papers. And slide it out, and then again rinse it off. Alright, and I bring over the rinsed product for you. There it is, swirling around in all its glory, and I'll blot it dry. And when I get started on my next print, I'm going to load the ink into my water in a different way by flicking the ink, tapping my brush and flicking the ink right onto the surface of the water, really loading up that surface. And I'm going to do the same with my soapy water, tapping my paintbrush to flick it onto the surface. So I disperse the ink and then I disperse the soapy water. And I'm going to use my tool again to really swirl this water around. So creating a lot of movement, all directions, swirling around in that water. And this creates sort of what I think of as the stereotypical marbled paper look of that very uniform swirls and spirals all over the paper with not necessarily a lot of contrast between light and dark. But I will use the copy paper for it, which I think is the lowest quality of paper that I'm using today, and in all honesty, I don't have much hope for how this copy paper will turn out with the print. So, slide it out, and I'll rinse it off again. So, it looked pretty good, and you know what? I am super impressed with the copy paper. It came out way clearer than I thought it was going to, and it is pretty light, but it may be hard for you to see because it's still pretty wet, but the marble pattern came out very clear, and I am super impressed. So, good for you, copy paper. Okay. And so, the only paper that I have not tried yet is the printmaking paper, which I feel will be the nicest paper to use. So I'm going to make a print that pulls out all the stops, and I'm going to use all the techniques that I've gone over so far. So I'm starting with my concentric rings, my concentric circles, building those out by alternating the ink and the soap, the ink and the soap. I will use my breath. I'll blow on it um, to make jagged lines and to make a swirl. I will use a tool to trace through the water and again disturb the ink in a different way. And I'm going to load up my brushes one more time and do something a little unorthodox by starting another set of rings right out of these. Look at that. Whoa. Really, there's a million different patterns to make, and no print ever turns out like the one before it or the one after it. Um, every one is an experiment and its own little discovery when you pull that print out and see how it turned out. So I have those jagged lines from blowing, and I flicked some of that soapy water in. I have a little bit of a swirl going now, if you can see. Starting to move some of that ink around the bin. I'm going to use my tool to trace out some shapes. Really disturb that water, get it swirling around. I love the swirl. And then again, look for an opportune time to drop in my printmaking paper. Again, I drop it from the middle, try to touch down the center of the paper first, and then let the sides fall in. Really let that paper soak in. I just poke down the corner there. And then slide it out and immediately rinse it off. And let me bring it around to show you that final product. The print with all the bells and whistles on the printmaking paper. Beautiful. Alright, and as I promised, a tiny container. So, if you don't have a container as big as I had, no big deal. Just cut down your paper so that it fits in there. And the small container, it really takes a lot less ink, as you'll see, because that surface area is so much smaller. It really fills up a lot quicker, and the rings really get pushed a lot further together. So I'm going to build another tiny set of rings here, and then I have a tiny piece of paper cut down so that it would fit inside of this container, and I'm going to make a little Suminagashi print. So here we go, and very, very gently I will lay my paper into here. Just making a few more designs in that. And there's the tricky part. Oh! Let that soak in for a second. Rinse it off. There you have it. So, thank you for watching. Please enjoy as I run this gallery of all the prints that I made today. And I hope that you have a great time making your own. Goodbye.